So this week, the assignment is to model your hero object, and, I'm sorry, not model it. The assignment is to texture your hero object. If you haven't already, if you have, you can use the time to either model other things or like make even nicer looking textures. But basically, complete textures for any and all channels that you plan to use. So if you need a bump map, displacement map, roughness map, etc., that should all be in there. I'm not gonna institute any particular like limit, like you have to have, 5 different maps for each texture. Just do whatever makes sense for your reference. And I do want more than just like default slider values. Default slider values for everything. If you have like one or two, like a really tiny piece of metal or something somewhere that you just like need to be metal looking, kind of whatever. But like for most of your object, it should be more than default slider values. And I usually would expect like at least two, more like 3 or 4 maps per texture. Again, I'm not making that a hard requirement, but just do whatever makes sense for your textures. Shoot for as much realism and detail as you can get. So even something like wood, even like a polished wood texture, there is always going to be a little bit of texture in that wood. And even if it's like epoxy coated wood or like resin coated wood, you would still see that wood texture under the epoxy coating, as weird as that sounds. So just like really pay attention to stuff like that. Again, even for like polished wood, I would expect maybe like a very small, subtle bump map, because it's really gonna help show out any of like the specular maps and stuff like that you have. And then probably you're gonna need to use, Photoshop or Mudbox, etc., to make these textures. I don't really care what you use. You're welcome to also start out with internet textures from like Google or textures.com or wherever as a base. I would guess that in most circumstances you would probably need to modify them based off of whatever the UVs of your object you're making. But I have no problem with you guys using those. Just be aware I will kind of be looking for, does this look like you just sort of grabbed a random, wood texture or whatever and like threw it on your object? If there's like weird seams places and stuff like that is stuff that I will look for. So you might need to do a little bit of manipulation to whatever textures you're using in Photoshop if you just pulled them off the internet randomly. So that's basically the bit for the model. Are there any questions on the texturing requirements? All right. The other thing that you will need to do is, so next week, you will be rendering a full turntable of your object. I will go over how to render a turntable in like 2 minutes. But this week we'll be rendering, basically set up your turntable, set up your lighting for it, render every 25th frame. That's basically just so you get an idea of, the feel of the turntable, like feel of the lighting, feel of the speed of the turntable, without having to actually render like 300 frames worth of stuff. And then I do have a few specific expectations for the turntable. So I really want to see lighting that is designed to show off the object well. So I don't want to see like half of your object falling completely into blackness, or be so overexposed that I just like can't see what the heck is happening with it. I would also like you to put your objects on some kind of platform. So think of just like, if you had like a little head model or something, put it on just like a silly little stand. It doesn't have to be fancy. I'll show you guys pretty much like the minimum expectation I have for that. Again, like 2 seconds when I demo making a turntable. But just put it on something so it's not just like sitting on the floor randomly spinning. And also for this one, I will take off points if there is not walls and a floor. So I've been kind of lenient with, just having an object on a floating plane over an HDRI. But this one I do want walls and a floor. And I don't want to be able, if you use an HDRI, I don't want to be able to like see that in the background. Again, you're totally welcome to use HDRIs. I just don't want to see, again, like an object floating on a plane, floating on an HDRI. And then these two, I'll go over that when I demo turntables. I'll go over like specifically how to do this, but Just make sure your object is moving at a constant speed and that your animation loops seamlessly. And make sure that your object rotates around the central pivot. Again, I'll go over that in like 2 minutes. But are there any questions about the expectations for the turntable? All right. And then what to submit, just zip me your project folder with 3 renders of your object. Yes, sorry. So for the renders of your object, if you could actually put that into your scene and test out your textures in the most updated version of both your day and your night lighting. So I do want, again, your textured object to be rendered in scene with correct lighting. So 3 renders of your object in your scene, any textures you used, the Maya file, and any reference image that you used, and then also the partial turntable renders. You can just throw those in your image folder. They don't need to be like some crazy fancy thing. Also, if you wouldn't mind just like dropping a note in the submission text if it's a high or low poly object, it just helps me because I have so many like mixed projects, like some smooth, some not smooth. It just helps me keep things straight and like not, you know, accidentally judge your model for like not smoothing well when it's not supposed to smooth well, that kind of thing. But yeah, so any questions on this? Cool. What's your name for attendance?
Nick.
Thanks. All right, cool. You can also see down here that I do, I think last quarter I made like a little tutorial series on like how to set up a turntable. It's probably more concise than whatever I'm going to show you in class. But yeah, so you guys are, again, feel free to reference that should you need to. All right.